The strange behavior. In a quiet neighborhood, a young father named John lived with his wife, Lisa, and their precious baby boy, Malik. Malik was a happy baby, always smiling and laughing. He loved to play with his toys and cuddle with his parents. But lately, John had noticed something strange happening. Every time Malik was near his grandmother, Ruth, he started to cry. John loved his mother, Ruth, and she was a big part of Malik's life. They had many happy moments together. Ruth would sing lullabies, and Malik would giggle with delight. However, this sudden change in Malik's behavior worried John. He couldn't understand why his baby was upset around someone he used to love. One sunny afternoon, John decided to watch carefully. He sat on the couch with a clear view of the living room. Ruth had come over for a visit, and everything seemed normal at first. Ruth sat on the floor, surrounded by Malik's toys, trying to engage with him. But as soon as she reached out to pick him up, Malik's face crumpled. He let out a loud, heart-wrenching cry that echoed through the room. "Why is he crying?" Lisa asked, looking confused. "He loves his grandma." "I don't know," John replied, frowning. "Something isn't right. He wasn't like this before." Ruth looked taken aback. "What's wrong with him?" she asked, her voice shaky. John felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wanted to protect Malik, but he didn't know how to address the issue without upsetting his mother. He decided to observe them more closely. As days passed, Malik's crying continued. Each time Ruth visited, the baby would scream and squirm whenever she came near. It was heartbreaking to watch. John started to ask Lisa questions. "Have you noticed how he acts around Grandma?" he said one evening as they were putting Malik to bed. "Yes, I have. It's strange. I don't know why he's reacting like this," Lisa replied, her brow furrowing in concern. "Maybe it's just a phase." John wasn't convinced. "It feels deeper than that. I think we need to find out what's going on. This isn't normal behavior." The following week, Ruth came over for another visit. John had prepared himself. He wanted to talk to her about what was happening with Malik. He felt nervous but knew it was important. As soon as Ruth entered the house, Malik started to cry again. "Let me try to calm him down," Ruth said, extending her arms. "No, wait," John said, a little louder than intended. Ruth paused, looking surprised. "I need to talk to you first." Ruth frowned. "What's the matter, John?" "I've noticed that Malik cries whenever you're around. It's been happening for weeks. I don't understand why," John said, his voice steady but firm. Ruth looked hurt. "You think I'm doing something wrong. I love that baby," she exclaimed, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "It's not that," John replied quickly. "I just want to understand. Can you tell me what you talk about when you're with him? I mean, is there something happening that I don't know about?" Ruth's expression softened as she looked at her grandson. "I talk to him like any grandmother would. I tell him stories. I sing to him." John could see that she was sincere, but there was still a shadow of worry in his heart. "But why does he cry? I don't want him to be upset. It breaks my heart." "I don't know, John. I wish I could help you," Ruth replied, her eyes welling up with tears. "Maybe he's just going through a phase. Children can be sensitive." John nodded, but he still felt uncertain. He decided to investigate further. He thought about what could be causing Malik's fear. Was there something in Ruth's behavior that was triggering it? Or was it something more? That night, John lay awake, listening to the sound of Malik's soft breathing. He wanted to make sure his baby felt safe and loved. The next day, he decided to take action. He would observe more closely and try to figure out what was making Malik cry. The following weekend, John invited Ruth over again, but with a plan. He set up a camera in the living room to record their interactions without being seen. He thought that if he could see what happened when he wasn't in the room, it might provide some answers. Ruth arrived and brought a bag of toys for Malik. As she played with him, John watched from a distance. At first, everything seemed fine. Ruth smiled and laughed, and Malik giggled. But then, without warning, Malik began to cry again. John's heart sank. He leaned closer to the camera, trying to catch every detail. He noticed Ruth's body language shift. Her smile faded, and she seemed to get nervous. She whispered something to Malik that John couldn't hear, and that's when Malik's cries grew louder. After the visit, John reviewed the footage. He felt a chill run down his spine. Ruth had whispered something that seemed to scare Malik. He couldn't make out the words, but it was clear that whatever it was made the baby very upset. Confused and frightened, John knew he had to confront Ruth again. This time, he needed to dig deeper to protect his son. He couldn't let this continue without understanding the truth behind Malik's strange behavior. With determination in his heart, John prepared to face his mother once more. This time, he was ready to ask the tough questions and get to the bottom of the mystery. As he sat down to plan what he would say, he hoped for answers that would bring peace to his family. Little did he know, the journey to understanding would reveal deeper secrets than he could ever imagine. The hidden truth. After reviewing the footage of Ruth's visit, John felt a heavy weight in his chest. The whispers that frightened Malik filled him with dread. He knew he had to confront Ruth again, but this time, he needed to be careful. His goal was to protect his son, but he also wanted to keep the family bond intact. John took a deep breath, preparing himself for the conversation ahead. The next day, he invited Ruth over for coffee. He kept the atmosphere light, but the tension was palpable. Malik was playing on the floor, happily surrounded by his toys, blissfully unaware of the brewing storm in the air. John watched Ruth closely as she entered, greeting Malik with a warm smile and a soft hug. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you ready for Grandma's fun?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with love. Malik, however, just stared at her, a small frown appearing on his face. John's heart sank again as he noticed that familiar look of unease. "Ruth, can we talk for a minute?" John said, trying to keep his tone calm. He gestured toward the kitchen. Ruth looked puzzled but followed him. Once they were alone, John took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what's been happening with Malik. I reviewed the video from your last visit," he began, watching Ruth's reaction carefully. Ruth's eyes widened in surprise. "You did what? Why would you do that?" "I needed to understand why he cries when you're around," John explained. "And I noticed something that really concerned me. You whispered something to him, and it made him very upset." Ruth's face changed. She looked defensive, crossing her arms. "I didn't mean to scare him. I was just trying to play with him. Kids can be sensitive. It's natural." "Maybe, but this seems different," John replied, his voice steady. "I want to help you, but I need to know what you said. It's important." Ruth hesitated, her eyes darting away from John. "It was just a joke. I didn't think he would take it seriously." "A joke?" John asked, feeling a mixture of frustration and concern. "What kind of joke?" Ruth sighed deeply, as if weighing her words. "I mentioned something about how some kids are afraid of the dark, and I said that if he wasn't careful, the monsters would come for him. I thought it would make him laugh, but I guess I was wrong." John felt his heart drop. "You said that to a baby. You can't joke about monsters with him. He's too young to understand." "I didn't mean any harm," Ruth replied, her voice rising defensively. "I thought it was playful." John took a moment to collect his thoughts. "I know you love him, and I appreciate that, but we need to create a safe space for Malik. He's too young for that kind of talk." Ruth's expression softened slightly, and she looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry, John. I never meant to scare him. I just thought he was old enough to hear silly things." John felt a mix of relief and sadness. "I think we should try to rebuild the trust between you two. It's important for him to feel safe around you." Ruth nodded slowly, her eyes beginning to glisten with unshed tears. "I promise I'll be more careful. I love Malik. I don't want to hurt him." "I know you do," John replied gently. "But I think we need to approach things differently. Maybe we can help him understand that Grandma loves him and only wants to play. They both returned to the living room, and Ruth sat down on the floor with Malik. She tried to engage him in a gentle manner, speaking softly and showing him the toys she had brought. John watched closely, feeling a flicker of hope. Malik seemed to warm up to her, smiling as she showed him a bright red teddy bear. "Look, Malik, isn't he cute?" Ruth said, her voice full of cheer. Malik glanced at her, then at the bear, and let out a small giggle. John smiled slightly, relieved to see a spark of joy. However, John still felt the need to be cautious. He knew that building trust would take time. That night, after Ruth left, he sat down with Lisa to discuss the day's events. "I think she understands now, but we need to keep an eye on things," John said, running a hand through his hair. "Malik needs to know that he's safe." "Agreed," Lisa replied, her voice soft. "It's good that you talked to her. Maybe we can help them bond again." The next day, John decided to take further action. He wanted to create a positive experience for Malik and Ruth. He planned a small family gathering at their house, inviting Ruth to join them for a fun afternoon. On the day of the gathering, John and Lisa set up the living room with bright decorations, balloons, and games. They hoped this would create a cheerful atmosphere and help Malik associate good feelings with his grandmother. When Ruth arrived, she looked surprised but pleased. "Wow, this is wonderful," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she took in the decorations. John smiled. "We thought it would be nice to have a little celebration. Let's make it a fun day for Malik." As they played games, Ruth focused on using cheerful words and positive interactions. John watched Malik's reactions closely. At first, he was a little hesitant, but slowly he began to laugh and play alongside Ruth. "Look at him," Ruth said, her heart swelling with joy as Malik began to reach for her. "He's playing. This is great." John felt relief wash over him. Maybe they were making progress after all. But in the back of his mind, he knew they had to remain vigilant. Building trust would take time, and he needed to keep the lines of communication open with Ruth. As the day continued, John felt a sense of hope. Perhaps they could overcome this challenge together as a family. But little did he know, the journey ahead would uncover more hidden truths that would test their bonds even further. The unexpected visitor. The next morning, the sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with a sense of renewal. John felt optimistic about the progress Ruth and Malik had made during their gathering. However, as he prepared breakfast, an unexpected visitor arrived at their doorstep, and the atmosphere shifted in an instant. John opened the door to find a woman he didn't recognize. She was tall, with short hair and a serious expression on her face. "Hello, is this the home of John and Lisa Davis?" she asked, her voice steady and authoritative. "Yes, that's us. Can I help you?" John replied, trying to gauge her demeanor. "I'm Agent Davis from the local FBI office," she said, flashing her badge briefly. "I need to speak with you about a matter concerning your son, Malik." A chill ran down John's spine. "What do you mean? Is Malik okay?" The agent nodded. "He's fine, but we have some concerns that we need to address. May I come in?" John hesitated for a moment, but then stepped aside to let her in. As she entered, he noticed her keen gaze scanning the room, as if she were taking mental notes. Lisa walked into the kitchen, her cheerful demeanor shifting to one of concern as she saw the agent. "Good morning. How can we help you?" Lisa asked, her voice steady but cautious. Agent Davis turned to them. "I need to ask you some questions about your recent interactions with Ruth, Malik's grandmother. We have reason to believe that she may not be the person you think she is." John's heart raced as he exchanged worried glances with Lisa. "What do you mean?" "Ruth is Malik's grandmother. She loves him. While that may be true, we've been investigating Ruth for some time. There are allegations against her that involve potential threats to children," Agent Davis explained, her expression serious. "Threats? What kind of threats?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling slightly. We believe that she has been involved in activities that could endanger minors, including manipulating them for personal gain," Agent Davis said. "We need to ensure that Malik is safe and that there are no underlying issues we need to address." John felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. Ruth would never hurt Malik. She's just been a bit misguided lately. We talked, and she seemed to understand. Agent Davis studied them closely. "I understand your concern, but we need to proceed with caution. We have reports of unusual behavior during her visits, and we need to investigate further. Have you noticed anything strange or concerning about her actions?" John paused, recalling the whispers he had seen on the video. "She did say something about monsters during her last visit, but I thought it was just a bad joke." Agent Davis's brow furrowed. "We need to take this seriously. It's important to protect children from any potential harm. Can you provide any evidence of her interactions with Malik?" John and Lisa exchanged looks again, unsure how much to share. "We have some footage from a couple of her visits," John said slowly, "but it's just playful stuff. I didn't think it was anything serious." "Every detail counts," Agent Davis insisted. "Please show me what you have. We'll analyze it and determine if further action is necessary." Feeling a knot in his stomach, John led the agent to their living room and pulled out his phone. He played the videos, one showing Ruth playing with Malik, laughing and singing. Then came the moment that made John's heart drop: the whispering about the monsters. Agent Davis watched intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "This is troubling," she finally said. "Whispering threats or fears into a child's mind can have lasting effects. We need to act quickly to ensure that Malik is not influenced by this." "Are you going to arrest her?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. "We need to investigate further before making any decisions," Agent Davis replied. "But I recommend limiting contact with Ruth until we can ensure that she poses no threat." John felt a wave of emotions wash over him. He wanted to protect his son, but also felt a deep sense of loyalty to his mother. "What do we do now?" he asked, feeling overwhelmed. "I'll be in touch after we've gathered more information," Agent Davis said, standing up. "In the meantime, keep an eye on Malik's behavior. If he shows any signs of distress or unusual fears, contact us immediately." As she left, the weight of the world seemed to settle on John's shoulders. He turned to Lisa, who looked pale and shaken. "What does this mean for us? For Malik?" "I think we need to take this seriously," Lisa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to protect him, even if it means making tough decisions about Ruth." John nodded, feeling torn. He knew that Ruth loved Malik, but the implications of what Agent Davis had said left him unsettled. As he watched Malik playing innocently in the other room, a rush of protectiveness surged within him. He had to do what was best for his son, no matter how difficult. In the days that followed, John and Lisa tried to create a normal routine for Malik, but the weight of the situation loomed over them. They decided to limit Ruth's visits, explaining that it was for Malik's safety, but it broke John's heart to see the pain in Ruth's eyes when he told her. Every day, he felt the burden of his decisions. What would happen if Ruth was not the person they thought she was? The worry consumed him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. As they navigated this uncertain path, little did they know that the true nature of Ruth's intentions was about to be revealed, and it would change everything they thought they knew about family, trust, and the lengths they would go to protect the ones they loved. "You said, unraveling secrets." Days turned into a week, and the tension in the Davis household grew thicker. John felt trapped between loyalty to his mother, Ruth, and his duty to protect his son, Malik. Every time he looked at Malik, playing happily in his toys, he was reminded of the looming threat Agent Davis had warned about. The couple had decided to keep Ruth at a distance, only allowing short phone calls where John tried to sound upbeat, but each conversation felt heavier than the last. Ruth's voice, usually so full of warmth, now sounded tinged with sadness and confusion. She couldn't understand why she couldn't see her grandson anymore, and it broke John's heart. One afternoon, while Malik was napping, John and Lisa sat down to review the footage of Ruth's visits again. They hoped to spot something they had missed before, something that would explain the agent's concerns. The living room was filled with the low hum of the TV, a contrast to the silence that filled the air between them. "Maybe we're overreacting," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ruth loves Malik. She would never hurt him." John sighed. "I wish I could believe that, but something doesn't feel right. We can't ignore what Agent Davis said." As they watched the videos, John felt a knot forming in his stomach. Suddenly, something caught his eye in the footage from one of Ruth's last visits. In the background, he could see Malik drawing with crayons, while Ruth leaned in close, her expression darkening for a split second. She was whispering again, this time with a look that made John uneasy. "Did you see that?" he asked, pausing the video. "Look at her face when she's talking to him." Lisa squinted at the screen, her brow furrowing in concentration. "What do you mean?" John rewound the footage and played it back. They watched as Ruth leaned over Malik, her lips moving slowly. Although they couldn't hear the words, the expression on her face was unmistakably intense. "It's like she's trying to get him to believe something," John said, feeling a chill run down his spine. "I don't like it," Lisa admitted, her eyes wide with concern. "It feels manipulative." "Exactly," John replied. "This isn't just playful grandma stuff. We have to dig deeper." That evening, John and Lisa decided to reach out to Agent Davis again. They needed guidance and a clearer understanding of the situation. John dialed the number, his heart racing as it rang. "Agent Davis," she answered, her voice brisk and professional. "Hi, it's John Davis. We reviewed the footage of my mother's visits again, and we noticed some concerning behavior," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We think she may be trying to influence Malik in a harmful way. I'm glad you reached out. It's important that you're aware of any changes in Ruth's behavior. I suggest you document everything, every conversation, every interaction. If you feel uncomfortable, limit Malik's contact with her," Agent Davis advised. "What do we do if we think she's trying to manipulate him?" John asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "Keep Malik safe. Talk to him about safe and unsafe behaviors. Make sure he understands that he can come to you if anyone says something that makes him uncomfortable. I'll start the investigation on our end, and we'll keep you posted on any developments," she replied. As they ended the call, John felt a mix of relief and fear. He knew they had to be vigilant, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the guilt of turning his back on Ruth. "What if we're wrong?" he asked Lisa, feeling vulnerable. "We can't take any chances, John. It's about Malik's safety," she said softly, squeezing his hand. In the days that followed, John and Lisa paid closer attention to Malik. They asked him questions about his time with Ruth, hoping to uncover any signs of fear or discomfort. At first, Malik seemed oblivious, recounting stories of games they played and snacks she brought, but there were moments when his expression would change, a fleeting look of concern crossing his face. One afternoon, while coloring together, Malik suddenly asked, "Daddy, why don't we see Grandma anymore?" John's heart sank. "Well, sweetheart, we just want to make sure you're safe. You know how much we love you, right?" "Yeah, but Grandma loves me too," Malik replied innocently, frowning. "Of course she does, but sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to keep kids safe," John explained, trying to simplify the complex emotions swirling in their lives. "Is Grandma a monster?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, buddy. Grandma is not a monster, but we just have to be careful, okay?" John said, choosing his words carefully. Malik nodded, but John could see the worry in his son's eyes. That night, as Malik slept peacefully, John and Lisa discussed what they should do next. They needed to confront Ruth and find out if she had any intentions that could harm Malik. Maybe we should invite her over, just the three of us, Lisa suggested. We can observe her behavior in person. I don't know if that's a good idea, John replied hesitantly. What if she reacts badly? I don't want to put Malik in any danger. But if we don't act, we'll never know the truth, Lisa insisted. We need to give her a chance to explain herself. John sighed, realizing that she was right. Okay, we'll invite her. But I'll be on guard, and we need to set some boundaries. As the plans took shape, John felt a sense of dread mixed with determination. They were stepping into a dangerous situation, one that could unravel everything they thought they knew about family and trust. As he lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation with Ruth would lead to revelations that could change their lives forever. In the days ahead, they would finally face Ruth, and the truths they uncovered would test the very foundation of their family. Would they be able to keep Malik safe, or would the shadows of Ruth's intentions prove to be darker than they ever imagined? Confrontation. The day finally arrived when John and Lisa decided to confront Ruth. The tension in the Davis household was palpable as they prepared for her visit. John felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. Would they be able to uncover the truth? Would Ruth admit to anything? Ruth arrived promptly at 2 p.m., her usual bright smile greeting them as she walked in. John noticed how she immediately swept her gaze toward Malik, who was busy playing in the living room. "Hello, sweetheart," Ruth exclaimed, her voice warm as she knelt to embrace Malik. "I've missed you so much." Malik hugged her back, but John could see the little boy's eyes darting nervously to his father. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly, still unsure of the situation. "Let's go play," Ruth suggested, pulling him toward the toy box. John exchanged a glance with Lisa, both of them feeling the weight of the moment. "Actually, Ruth, can we sit and talk for a minute?" John asked, his tone firm but gentle. Ruth looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "Sure, what's on your mind?" "Let's all sit down together," Lisa added, trying to keep the atmosphere calm. They settled at the kitchen table, and John's heart raced. He knew they had to tread carefully. "I know you love Malik very much, and we appreciate that," John began, choosing his words with care. "But we've noticed some things that concern us. Can you tell us what you talk about when you're with him?" Ruth's expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" "I just play with him and tell him stories. What's there to worry about?" "Sometimes you seem intense," Lisa interjected, hoping to clarify without sounding accusatory. "Malik told us you whisper things to him, things he doesn't understand." Ruth sat back, her eyes narrowing. "I'm just trying to share my wisdom with him. I want him to know about his family's history and the importance of strength." John felt a chill run through him. "What kind of strength are you talking about?" he asked cautiously. "Strength to survive in a world that's not always kind," Ruth replied, her voice steady. "You two have to prepare him for what he might face as he grows up." John exchanged worried looks with Lisa. "We want him to be strong too, but in a healthy way. We don't want him to feel scared or pressured." "He's only 6 years old," John explained. Ruth sighed, her demeanor shifting again. "I'm just trying to help him be aware." "You can't shield him from everything, John. Sometimes the truth is harsh." "Ruth, we're not trying to shield him from reality, but we need to know you're not putting thoughts in his head that could confuse him," Lisa added, her voice softening. "I'm his grandmother. I have a right to teach him." Ruth shot back, her tone rising. "Of course you do. But there's a fine line between teaching and influencing him in ways that could be harmful," John stated firmly, hoping to maintain control of the conversation. Malik, who had been quietly playing with his toys, glanced back at them with wide eyes. The tension in the room was thick, and he looked unsure of what to do. John felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He didn't want Malik to feel trapped between their conflict. "Malik, honey," John called gently, "why don't you come sit with me for a moment?" Malik shuffled over, still clutching a toy car. John hugged him close, hoping to shield him from the brewing storm. "It's okay, buddy. Just stay with me for a bit," he whispered, looking into his son's eyes, which were filled with confusion. Ruth's expression softened slightly as she looked at Malik. "I just want what's best for him," she said, her voice lowering again. "You have to understand that." "We know you want what's best," Lisa replied. "But we need to make sure that what's best isn't causing him distress. Can you promise us that you'll be more mindful about what you say to him?" Ruth hesitated, her eyes searching their faces for understanding. "I'll try, but you have to understand my perspective. I've lived through a lot, and I want to share that with him." "Sharing history is important," John agreed, "but let's do it in a way that doesn't scare him. We want to create a safe space for Malik." After a long silence, Ruth nodded slowly. "Okay, I can see you're worried. I'll be more careful." John felt a mix of relief and concern. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a step forward. They continued their conversation, discussing how they could involve Ruth in healthier activities with Malik, emphasizing creativity and fun. As the conversation wrapped up, John felt hopeful. Maybe they could rebuild the trust that had been strained. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still much more to uncover. As Ruth left, Malik hugged her tightly, and John watched closely. "I love you, Grandma," Malik said, and John felt a knot in his stomach. "I love you too, sweetie. Remember, I'm always here for you," Ruth replied, her voice a blend of warmth and something darker that John couldn't quite place. Once the door closed behind her, John turned to Lisa. "Do you think she means it? Can we trust her?" "I don't know, but we'll have to keep watching," Lisa replied. "Let's stay vigilant. For Malik's sake." As the day ended, John couldn't shake the unease that settled in his heart. The confrontation had opened a door, but what lay beyond it was still shrouded in uncertainty. They would have to be prepared for whatever came next, because the truth about Ruth and her intentions was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. The unexpected revelation. The days turned into weeks, and the tension in the Davis household lingered like a storm cloud. John and Lisa had decided to keep a closer eye on Ruth's interactions with Malik, wanting to ensure that their son felt safe and loved. They maintained their open communication, but in the back of John's mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off with Ruth. One afternoon, while John was at work, Lisa sat on the couch with Malik, watching cartoons. Malik was cheerful, laughing at the antics of his favorite characters. Yet every time Ruth's name came up, he grew quieter, his laughter fading. Lisa sensed that Malik still felt uneasy about the situation, but couldn't quite articulate why. "Malik," she said softly, turning off the TV, "can we talk about Grandma for a minute?" "Okay," Malik replied, his small voice barely above a whisper. "What do you like most about spending time with her?" Lisa asked, hoping to draw him out. Malik shrugged. "She tells me stories, but sometimes they make me feel weird." Lisa felt a pang of worry. "Weird how? Can you tell me more?" Malik looked down at his hands. "She talks about things, bad things, like people being mean and how I should be careful." Lisa nodded, her heart sinking. "And how does that make you feel?" "Scared," Malik admitted, his eyes filling with tears. "I don't want to be scared, Mommy." "Oh, sweetheart," Lisa said, pulling him into a comforting hug. "You don't have to be scared. You're safe here with us." Malik sniffled, and after a moment he asked, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course," Lisa encouraged, sensing the weight behind his words. "When Grandma told me about the bad people, she said I should be ready to fight them if they come for me. But I don't want to fight. I just want to play." Lisa's heart raced. Ruth's influence was more damaging than they realized. "Thank you for telling me, Malik. It's important to talk about these things. You don't have to listen to anyone who makes you feel scared." Malik nodded, wiping his eyes. "But I don't want Grandma to be mad at me." "Grandma loves you very much," Lisa reassured him. But sometimes people can say things that aren't good for us. We need to keep our hearts and minds safe, okay? Malik nodded again, and Lisa felt a mixture of sadness and determination. She couldn't let Ruth's influence cloud Malik's childhood. That evening, John returned home, and Lisa shared her conversation with him. "We have to address this again," she said, her voice steady but anxious. "It's clear that Ruth is planting seeds of fear in Malik's mind, and that's not healthy." "I agree," John replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "We can't let her continue to speak to him like that. It's not right." They decided that they needed to have another talk with Ruth. The stakes felt higher now, and John's earlier relief was replaced with dread. What if Ruth refused to change her ways? What if she didn't care about the impact of her words on Malik? The following weekend, they invited Ruth over for lunch, carefully planning their approach. The atmosphere was tense as they waited for her arrival. When Ruth walked in, she was all smiles and warmth, but John and Lisa exchanged glances, knowing they had a difficult conversation ahead. They sat down at the table, and Lisa served lunch, making small talk to ease into the moment. After a while, John cleared his throat. "Ruth, we need to discuss something important again." Ruth's smile faded slightly, and she nodded. "What is it?" "We're concerned about the things you've been saying to Malik," John began, his voice firm but calm. "He's told us that your stories about the world have been frightening him." Ruth's expression hardened. "I'm just preparing him for reality. He needs to know about the dangers out there. By scaring him." "That's not helping," Lisa interjected, her frustration bubbling up. "He's a child, Ruth. He should be playing and learning about love, not being told to fight against imaginary threats." Ruth crossed her arms defensively. "You're being too soft. The world is harsh, and he needs to be ready." "Ready for what?" John asked. "To grow up anxious and fearful. That's not how we want to raise him." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "So you want to pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows? That's not reality." "We want to create a safe environment for Malik," Lisa replied, her tone pleading. "A place where he can learn about the world without being overwhelmed by fear. Can you understand that?" Ruth fell silent, her expression a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "I just thought I was helping." "You're not helping by instilling fear in him," John said gently. "It's okay to share stories, but they should be uplifting and positive. Can you promise us you'll be more mindful?" After a long pause, Ruth finally nodded. "I'll try. I just want what's best for him, you know." "We know," John said, feeling a glimmer of hope, "and we appreciate that. But we need to work together on this." As the conversation came to a close, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. Perhaps they could turn a corner and restore the connection that had been strained. However, as Ruth left their home that day, John couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to uncover. The truth behind Ruth's intentions still lingered in the air, casting shadows over the moment of resolution. It seemed their journey to protect Malik was far from over, and the storm they had faced might still have one last thunderclap waiting just beyond the horizon. The turning point. Days passed, and John and Lisa hoped Ruth would keep her promise to be more mindful around Malik. However, they soon realized that old habits die hard. While Ruth seemed to make a conscious effort to change her approach, her unsettling comments slipped through more often than they would have liked. One evening, as Malik played in the living room, John and Lisa overheard him talking to his toys. "You have to be brave," he said, mimicking Ruth's tone from their previous conversations. "There are bad people who will hurt you if you don't fight back." Lisa's heart sank at the sound of her son echoing Ruth's words. John looked at her, both of them feeling the weight of their concern. They knew they couldn't let this continue. "Malik," Lisa called gently, kneeling down to his level. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Okay, Mommy," Malik replied, setting down his toys. "Why don't you tell me about what Grandma says to you?" Lisa prompted, hoping to keep the conversation light and open. Malik hesitated, his little face scrunching up in thought. She says to be careful because some people are bad. But I don't want to fight. I just want to play. That's exactly right, sweetheart, Lisa said, feeling a rush of affection for her son. You don't have to fight anyone. You're safe here with us. And we love you very much. Malik nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But Grandma says it's important to be ready. What if the bad people come? Listen, buddy, John chimed in, sitting next to Lisa. There are people who do bad things in the world, but it's not your job to fight them. You're just a kid. Your job is to learn, play, and grow up happy. We're here to protect you. Yeah, Malik said, still uncertain. But Grandma says. Grandma loves you, but she's worried about things that might not happen, Lisa interjected. We don't want you to carry that worry. We want you to enjoy being a kid. Malik looked down, absorbing their words. Okay, Mommy. That night, as John and Lisa tucked Malik into bed, John couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to take more decisive action regarding Ruth. He loved her, but her influence on Malik was dangerous. They couldn't wait for her to change on her own. They needed to address the situation head-on. Let's talk to her again, John suggested after Malik drifted off to sleep. We need to be clear about what we want for Malik and why this matters so much. Lisa nodded in agreement, though she felt a pang of anxiety at the thought of confronting Ruth once more. I just hope she understands. The following weekend, they invited Ruth over again. This time, they felt a stronger resolve to set boundaries. As they sat at the kitchen table, John took a deep breath before speaking. Ruth, we need to have another conversation about your influence on Malik, he began, maintaining a calm demeanor. We've noticed that he's still echoing some of the fears you shared with him. Ruth looked surprised. I thought we had this talk already. I'm trying to be more positive. Lisa added, but your stories still carry fear. He's just a child, and he should be exploring the world, not worrying about fighting bad people. I'm just trying to prepare him, Ruth insisted, her voice rising defensively. The world is dangerous, and he needs to know that. Preparing him doesn't mean scaring him, John responded, his patience waning. Children learn through love and joy. You have to understand that your words have a lasting impact on his little mind. Ruth shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I don't want him to be naive. I want him to be strong. But at what cost? Lisa asked softly. He shouldn't have to shoulder that kind of fear. It's overwhelming for a child. Ruth's face tightened, and for a moment, silence filled the room. John and Lisa exchanged worried glances, unsure of how Ruth would respond. Finally, Ruth spoke, her voice quieter now. I just don't want him to get hurt. I care about him. We know you do, John replied gently. But there are other ways to show him that you care. You can teach him about kindness, empathy, and how to stand up for himself without instilling fear. Ruth looked down at her hands, lost in thought. I just thought I was helping him. Let's work together on this, Lisa urged, feeling a glimmer of hope. We can all teach him about the world in a way that empowers him without fear. Will you help us with that? After a long pause, Ruth finally nodded, her eyes glistening. I'll try. I really do want what's best for him. As they wrapped up their conversation, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. Perhaps this time they could create a more supportive environment for Malik. But as Ruth left their home that evening, John couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of a much deeper issue. He knew that the battle wasn't just against fear, but also against a mindset that had been ingrained over generations. Moving forward, John and Lisa vowed to be vigilant. They would continue to nurture Malik's joy and innocence while standing firm against the shadows that threatened to overshadow his childhood. And in doing so, they hoped to forge a path toward a brighter, safer future for their son, one filled with love, understanding, and the freedom to simply be a kid.